Chapter 5, County Jail Acolytes. I was now 19 years old, and one thing was clear. I was definitely going to prison. For how long they sent me and for what I get convicted on, I didn't know. But I was going to prison, and I had that I don't give a fuck attitude. I had seen a lot, had done a lot, and now I was ready to earn my bones. Earning bones is attaining respect and credence by committing acts of violence on behalf of the organization. I had an incendiary temperament and was looking for something. At the time, I was unsure why, but I always felt a chronic need to always prove myself. I wanted to make a name for myself, and the county jail was a perfect conclave full of open opportunities. It didn't take long for my first opportunity to come along either. From the 6th floor in Frisco, I got transferred to San Bruno, an extended part of the jail that is used to house overflow inmates waiting to go to court. One day during yard time, I was walking the yard with a couple of my homeboys when one by the name of Wallace Johnson from Hampshire Street spotted an individual who he identified as a Sureño. This guy was attempting to coalesce with the Border Brothers and shroud his affiliation by surrounding himself with them. Wallace swore up and down that the guy had a number 13 tattooed on his chest, so we pushed up on the guy and I jammed him up. I asked him if he was a Sureño. Before he could answer, I socked him in the mouth. The guy didn't even attempt to defend himself. He did what most guys that are scared do in situations like that when they get jammed up by themselves. He claimed he wasn't a Sureño and that he didn't bang. But I had already made my mind up that I wanted to stab this guy. Nobody had a piece readily available. I told Wallace, just leave him alone. We'll get him on the next yard if he's stupid enough to come out. As soon as I got back to my cell in 6th North, I told my cellie, Louie Looney Lou Vega from South City, what had happened and what I intended to do. Looney had been on the yard at the time, but was at the weight pile when Wallace and I approached the guy. I told Looney I didn't need any help. The only thing I wanted him to do was keep point and ensure that none of the other paisas, slang term for Mexican national, didn't get involved. At this time, I hadn't been schooled on weaponry or really anything else for that matter. My concept of making a weapon was based on common sense. It consisted of constructing anything with a point on it that would break the skin and be indurated enough to use as a stabbing instrument. I used the handle of a toilet bowl scrubber to make the piece. The stock was about 10 inches long. I removed the scrubber portion and filed a diamond-shaped tip against the floor. On the following day, when we were scheduled for yard, I sat down with Looney and laid out exactly how I wanted to get this guy. My plan was to catch him in the Sally Port on his way out to the yard where there would be a lot of traffic and in an area that was considered to be one of the biggest blind spots. I heard stories of people getting stabbed there, so that spot stuck with me. I already had a strong proclivity for violence from the streets, so I wasn't scared to spill blood, but at the same time, I was a little nervous because of the things that could have happened and I wasn't trying to get caught. I told Looney that we had to be the first ones out as soon as they opened up the doors to catch him coming out. When the doors opened for yard, we were the first ones down the stairs and to the Sally Port before anyone passed through the gates. As all the tears began to file out, I watched the gate of 5 South where this guy was housed, but didn't see him come out. I waited until everybody was almost out and then told Looney that we were probably going to have to go up to 5 South to get him. This was taking a huge risk because we'd have to climb 5 full flights of stairs, stab the guy, and then get back down to the north stairwell before the door started to close. But I was dead set on getting this guy, and this outweighed the risk. When Looney and I got to the 5 South gate, Wallace already had the guy blocked into a small area that separated the front gate from the housing area. Wallace blocked him from going into the main tier, so he was basically trapped between us. Knowing we had to be quick, I barreled into the guy and started stabbing him. I grabbed a hold of his shirt collar and pulled him down so I could get clear shots at his head. He tried blocking me as much as he could, but I just kept aiming around his hands and kept stabbing him in the head and face. The plastic was definitely breaking the skin, but if this piece were made out of steel, I probably would have killed the dude. There was blood everywhere. After stabbing him about 15 times in the head, face, and hands, I let go of his collar and ran back out the gate. Then I made my way down the stairs so that I could get back to 6 North before the doors closed. When I got back on the tier, I broke the tip off and got rid of all my clothes. I literally had blood all over me. Now I began to wonder if I was going to catch a new case. I did this so openly, somebody was definitely going to tell on me. If this guy didn't, somebody else would. He definitely needed medical attention. This type of incident usually leads to a major shakedown and an investigation, and that's exactly what happened. Not even 20 minutes later, the cops were locking down the jail and began a cell-to-cell search. They were looking for weapons, checking our hands for fresh marks or other signs of fighting, and they looked at our tattoos. I didn't have any marks, so I wasn't worried about them checking me. I was more worried about somebody identifying me. But to my amazement, nobody told on me and I never got caught. The thing about this whole incident that caught me off guard is that it unexpectedly created a lot of tension with the blacks. Even though it didn't involve them, I think it was more so out of feeling threatened based on the fact that I had weapons all over the tier. But I couldn't understand this because at the time, even though I wasn't educated on prison politics, I knew, or at least I thought, the blacks were supposed to be my allies. And I knew that the Sureños were common enemies to the blacks. But sometimes I guess we don't always march to the same beat, and over the years, I would have to learn this myself. A few weeks later, I was moved down to the kitchen in 2 South. I had previously signed up to work there, and this is where a lot of the homeboys were housed at. This was considered the penthouse suite. There was a weight bench, ping pong table, and always good grub that you could only get from the bakers and the cooks. Some of my homies were even hitting PCP and heroin. But as soon as I had settled in, I became obsessed with making weapons. I was making weapons out of anything I could get my hands on, literally. Some of the bunks even had the old metal springs on them, so at times, I'd be breaking off the springs. It would be nearly impossible to do it without other people seeing me, but nobody said a word. In retrospect, I now realize that I was a loose cannon and was developing an insolent attitude. Having 1 or 2 pieces on hand was understandable, but I had pieces stashed everywhere. This wasn't a war zone, it wasn't necessary, but I was young, hard-headed, and eager to start trouble. One day when I decided to go on one of my little tirades, a couple of my older homies were playing pinochle and had been using a white guy as a 4th player. I walked up to the table and grabbed a hand of cards that were just sitting there. Apparently, this white guy stepped away from the table for a minute. As I stood there arranging his hand, he came back and asked for his hand back. I told him to wait, but he chirped off, saying something that ended up getting me upset. I walked away from the table and told one of my homeboys named Manuel Negro Negron that I was going to hit the guy. There was no reason to do it other than just wanting to do it. It wasn't that he disrespected me. I just didn't like the guy and my mind was already made up. I waited until they finished playing their card game. Then I pulled out a small piece of steel that I had hidden in a ceiling vent. It was the handle of a serving utensil. When the white guy walked in between his bunk and another bunk, I walked up behind him and stabbed him twice real quick in the side of his face. One blow actually penetrated his cheek and knocked out a tooth. The other one was just a deep scratch. I thought it was funny, but my homeboys didn't find my antics funny at all. In fact, a few of them got upset with me, but I didn't care, and I didn't know any better. I had a reckless and embellic attitude. I was green and undisciplined. The following morning, after the stabbing, I woke up to see about 7 deputies running into the dorm, heading straight for my bunk. Somebody had obviously told on me. They told me to get up and not to touch anything. As they handcuffed me and walked me out of the dorm, I made eye contact with Negro and gave him that look as if to say, get rid of all the pieces. He was already on it. As soon as I was outside the dorm, they asked me, where's the weapon? I dummied up and acted like I didn't know what they were talking about. They said, either tell us where it's at or we're gonna go in there and tear everybody's shit up. I said, I ain't got no weapon. They said, okay, if we go in there and find it, you're gonna get charged with it. I said, go ahead. And that's exactly what they did. They pulled everybody out and searched the whole dorm but didn't find anything. The homeboys had already gotten rid of everything. Later that day, they moved me back to 6 North. Looney was gone, but I was about to get sentenced anyway. Prior to leaving, another one of my homeboys named Rudy Rooster Martinez had gotten at me and told me that I should think about making a commitment to the NR, the Nuestra Raza, when I got to San Quentin. That was the first time I had ever heard anything about the NR. He told me that I had a lot of potential and that I showed the kind of initiative they were looking for. I asked him a few basic questions about the NR and what it represented, and he gave me some real general answers and said that they would eventually approach me anyway. I was going away for at least 5 years if all my cases weren't ran concurrent, so this stuck in my mind. I thought this might have been my calling. 2 weeks later, I jumped on a 7-year deal and was on my way to San Quentin.